Mark Andrews' future in Baltimore might seem a little shaky now after a bad moment in the playoffs, but whether it's through a trade or if they release him altogether, the Chargers should be very interested in pursuing the All-Pro tight end.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, it is blatantly obvious after watching the 2024 season that the Chargers desperately need a pass-catching tight end to add to the offensive arsenal. And Mark Andrews makes a ton of sense. A Raven, and there's a lot of Ravens ties with the Chargers, and that's a situation the Chargers absolutely should be monitoring. And there is definitely going to be some pressure on Jim Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz to go out there and continue to build out this team in Jim Harbaugh's likeness. And will Joe Hortiz make a trade? He definitely has shown that he is not afraid to do so.
Yeah, 3 player trades in his first season as GM, 1 draft trade for Joe Hortiz. I absolutely think we're going to see him make a trade. Will it be shipping someone out or bringing someone in? But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. David, it is Tuesday, meaning it's buy or sell Tuesday, where we get into the biggest Chargers storylines and overreactions, and there's a lot of great ones to get into. And thank you to everyone who hit us up at Locked On LAC or wherever you hit us up. The voicemail at 323-524-7924. But let's start with one, David, we wanted to get to yesterday, but we just didn't have time for, and that is revolving around Mark Andrews, because there's been a little bit of buzz that Mark Andrews could be a cut candidate for the Ravens with a $16 million cap hit going into 2025. And also, with the Ravens having their tight end of the future kind of already in the building with Isaiah Likely, who's, a budding superstar tight end at that position. And now the buy or sell is this, David. The Chargers should find a way to pursue Mark Andrews, whether it's trying to sign him in free agency or even trading for him.
Well, the Chargers definitely love that pipeline from the Baltimore Ravens to Los Angeles. So it just makes a ton of sense to keep that thing on flowing. And so, yeah, I'm definitely going to buy it. The Chargers need to bring in somebody who understands the system, that has played for Greg Roman in the past, who knows exactly how he likes to play, who is a definite pass-catching threat, even in 2024. I mean, 55 receptions, 673 yards, 11 touchdowns, which is first amongst tight ends, according to PFF. Also first in passer rating when targeted, 140.9, and first in average depth of target. So he is still getting it done at a very, very high level. He obviously has grossly produced all of the tight ends on the Chargers roster. And this guy's only 29 years old, 7 years in the league. He's a veteran, and he is very familiar with this system and knows that the Chargers want to run the football. He's going to be a part of that, but also he's going to really add a huge shot in the arm to that pass-catching element to the Chargers offense, which obviously needs a lot of that injection.
Yeah, and in some ways it would feel like you're buying low on him, right? Because of the situation that he's in, where the Ravens are going into 2025 with some hard decisions to make, and I think only $17 million in cap space, which goes quickly when you're talking about filling out that roster with the free agents that they have, because that's not including Derrick Henry, who's an upcoming free agent. And you have a cap hit that they could save $11 million on in Mark Andrews.
That sounds like a good chunk of change.
And he did probably, one of the more Chargers things you could see someone do, which is, dropping the 2-point conversion in that game that would have tied the game for his quarterback, for, who really needed that drive for narrative standpoints, right?
Yeah,
because the narrative on Lamar Jackson is a lot different today if he comes up with it. Obviously, 1:30 left for Josh Allen to go try and win that game with a field goal. It wasn't a guarantee, but I think the big thing here is having already kind of seen what he can do in Greg Roman's offense. You've talked about a little bit, but just to put it into perspective, I mean, he had his best season under Greg Roman, 2021, which is just one of the better tight end seasons
Just a
ever.
monster year.
107 catches, 1,361 yards, and 9 touchdowns. I mean, you brought up 11 touchdowns this year, which could help the Chargers, who were not great inside the red zone. Not in the above average team inside the red zone, bottom half of the league. When you have Justin Herbert, that's pretty bad. And I think that he's someone that, you know, you talked about him having the most at tight end. He had 3 more than George Kittle, who was second with 8 touchdowns this season. So he is a huge red zone threat. And in 4 seasons with Greg Roman, 302 catches, 3,761 yards, and 31 touchdowns. So you know that he can produce in this offense. You know that this offense has worked best with a tight end like him, with a Vernon Davis or a Delaney Walker in years before in San Francisco. Tight ends have thrived. And if the Chargers want to continue to feature tight ends the way that they do, this is, finding a way to bring him in is a great move. And yes, I mean, he doesn't bring you a vertical threat. He's not going to make you more dynamic from like a speed standpoint. Missed 7 games in 2023. All those things factor into it. I think that a tight end room with, you can still bring back Stone Smart. You still have Will Dissly. You add Mark Andrews to that room, and now all of a sudden, a room that feels like it's a weakness right now feels like a huge strength.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's adding somebody who has done it at the highest level of football, and has done it in an offense that is going to be the one that you're going to be in for the second year in a row. I think somebody coming in with that type of cachet, with those type of results and that resume, I think would be a much, much needed security blanket for Justin Herbert, which he's already showcased. When you give him a good one, like Hunter Henry, like he had in his rookie season, there is a lot of catches to be had. And what he did with Will Dissly also is pretty admirable. Imagine what that looks like with Mark Andrews instead.
Absolutely. And the nice thing is if you did trade for him, which I'm not saying is likely, but I still think it's kind of like Keenan Allen, where he probably wouldn't cost what you think he might as a player with an expiring deal with a giant cap hit that, isn't necessarily in the future or isn't in the long-term plans, which he could be in Baltimore. We'll have to see. But I do think it just gives you another premier offensive player, which is what this team desperately needs, and it gives you more options. If you want to keep running these 2 tight end sets, you have to have guys better than Will Dissly and Tucker Fisk and Scott Matlock out there running routes for you. So if you want to lean into that, get somebody that can actually threaten a team if they're in their base package that can actually beat them in the passing game. And Mark Andrews has proven time and time again he can do that. But it's not the only route the Chargers can go as far as improving their tight end room, which we have this from JDM, I think, in the same vein, saying buy or sell. We drafted Tyler Warren or a Colston Loveland, if not available, instead of a wide receiver in round 1. Bolt up and love the show. So this is the other option the Chargers have, David. If they don't want to go add one in free agency, and there's not a lot out there as far as the tight ends, and the talent out there goes, this could be an option where the Chargers do try to attack that position, tight end, in round 1.
Absolutely it is, and I'm all for that option.
You're buying
I've been in love with Colston Loveland since last year's draft when we were doing draft prep on Mikey Sanderstill and other guys on that Michigan team. It was like,
Colston,
man, this guy looks amazing. Like, he is an absolute weapon. When is he going to be available? And well, now he's going to be the time where he's going to be available. So if he's there, then yeah, I'm definitely running to the podium and making that pick. I think that would be an awesome one. I think that this is not going to, whether they acquire Mark Andrews or not, I still don't think it precludes them from getting a tight end, one of the best tight ends in the draft, bar none, whether it is, Warren or Colston Loveland. I think this is a decision that I'm all for in the making. And hey, after what Brock Bowers did, who literally had the best rookie tight end season of all time, I think that might change some stances on how front offices view taking tight ends in the first round.
Which would be bad for the Chargers in the sense that guys could go before they pick, right? Because these are the only 2 guys that are being considered in the first round. But tight ends don't always go as early as you think they will. And I think Brock Bowers is a good example of that, going 13 as a guy who is easily a top 10 pick and a guy that we were okay with the Chargers taking at 5 because we could just tell how good he was. And right now, Tyler Warren is easily the best prospect out there. He's more of a jack of all trades. I mean, he runs, Wildcat with Penn State. So he's a different kind of prospect for sure. He's the 16th ranked prospect, so not crazy to think he could slide to 22. Funny enough, Colston Loveland, a guy whose stock might be even a little worse than it should be because of the quarterback play that Michigan had this year. He's the 22nd ranked prospect on ESPN. Who has the 22nd pick? The Chargers do. So I think it's There's a great argument for it, helping your passing game and helping your running game, because both of these guys bring both. Both of these guys bring you impact in the blocking department as well, which is not something you always see out of college tight ends. And both of these guys, would fit exceptionally well into your offense. The good news is this isn't the only conversation that we're going to have about this, because on Thursday, we're going to open up a little bit more and do our first kind of draft scouting of the year, getting into both of these prospects who the Chargers could take at 22. But it is Buy or Sell Tuesday, and we have more great buy or sells to get into, including if the pressure is now on Jim Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz after a honeymoon season to get things together and build a true team for Justin Herbert in 2025 and beyond. We're getting all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about Game Time, because I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year, going to Blink-182 and getting great seats with Game Time that said they were obstructed, but with the 360 view that I got, I could tell I could see the stage from exactly where I was sitting and got a great deal. Saw them for $18, but now Game Time also has a great feature called Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And with Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat, which is one of my favorite parts. And the super deal was particularly impressive because it offered great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, they have the all-in pricing that you can toggle with no hidden fees, no surprises at checkout. You see the cost up front, which is always so great. I hate hidden fees. It's so annoying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. David, we have more great buy or sells to get into, and I think we have a really good one here from Athir, who's looking at this offseason, and we all know what the pressure, there is to, facing Justin Herbert right now after losing his second playoff game and kind of the narratives that are surrounding him. But he thinks actually the pressure is more on Jim Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz going into this offseason.
Daniel, David, Athir, Buy or Sell Tuesday offseason edition. All the pressure is on Coach Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz to give Justin Herbert this offseason anything that he deserves. They have the money, they have the sources, they have no excuses. They have to spend even if they have to be in the negative book in 2026. This is not about 2026, this is 2025. I am buying that the pressure is on them big time. What do you say? Thank you.
I think it's a great buy or sell, David. Which would you go with?
Yeah, I think I'm going to sell that all of the pressure is on Jim Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz. I am going to say that definitely is pressure there, but the pressure is to continue to build this team in Jim Harbaugh's likeness. And I think what they had to do was to make sure that they could, try to make this team competitive in 2024, and they achieved that. In 2025, now they have the resources to be able to go out there and really build this thing the way Jim Harbaugh wants it and go out there and get all the pieces for Justin Herbert. But now, if they do that, then pressure is on Justin Herbert to show up and win the football games that they're supposed to win and go out there and win a playoff game. Because if they go out there and get the interior offensive line, the weapons, they go out there and fix all these holes, and Justin Herbert still does not get the job done, then we're having a much, much different conversation.
Yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from. I think I would disagree. I mean, I guess you have to kind of get into, okay, what is all the pressure? I mean, the pressure's on Justin Herbert no matter what. But I think the part I disagree with you on is that the pressure's on Justin Herbert whether they build it or not. I mean, Justin Herbert didn't have a team that can compete with the best teams this year, and look at the scrutiny that he faced, right? So no matter what, people aren't going to remember what's around you. People are only going to remember what you did in the playoffs, and he's 0-2. Period. End of story. That's just how the narratives get written. That's what the national overview is going to be for people who don't watch him every week and don't actually see how good he is. That being said, I do think there's a lot of pressure on Joe Hortiz and Jim Harbaugh, because I do think you get a honeymoon year. Your reputation buys you a year where no one was expecting anything, but now after winning 11 games in 2024, you have expectations. Last year, you exceeded them by a lot. It's going to be hard to exceed 11 wins in next season, right? When you look at this team, they did so much with less. Now you have all the resources, and I think that brings a different kind of pressure, because, I mean, you said that all the pressure wasn't all on them, but you also said at the same time, like, But you have to use these resources and keep building in Jim Harbaugh's image. And I do think there is pressure to do that, because if you have all these resources and you have all the draft picks and you can sign whoever you want now if you can't put that team together, things start looking a little worse and you start questioning things. Right now, you're finding great draft picks later on in the draft. You're making great value signings, but now you have to hit on big contracts. Now you have to do it in the draft again. You're going to need immediate contributors. So I do think there's a lot of pressure on these guys, because I think everyone gave them a pass in year one and they, exceeded expectations. Now the window's here and you need to compete in 2025 to Athir's point. Now, don't be reckless. And I disagree with, going into the red in 2026. And I think that's one of the biggest differences between Tom Telesco and Joe Hortiz is I think he'll be more responsible with it. But I don't think they'll need to go into the red. They have plenty of space, and they should be able to do whatever they want. And now they have to hit on all of those. So they have to do what the Chargers weren't able to do with Phillip Rivers later on in his career, weren't able to do so far with Justin Herbert, and that is give him a team that's good enough to make a run in the playoffs. But let's get to this from Daniel Ramirez quickly, who says, buy or sell, last year is going to be the worst team under the Jim Harbaugh era. I think this comes down to trust and how much you trust. And I think right now, I'm buying it because I fully believe in the direction of this program. I believe in Joe Hortiz with what he was able to do. At the same time, there's still also a chance that you lose Khalil Mack and J.K. Dobbins and Joey Bosa and Elijah Molden and Josh Palmer and Poona Ford. The list goes on and on. It could look like a much different team. You're still going to be expected to be good in 2025.
Yeah, I'm going to buy it as well. I think the biggest thing that Jim Harbaugh had to change in year one was eradicating the culture of playing down and charging. That was the biggest thing that they had to do, was to completely get rid of playing down to their competition, winning the games that they're supposed to win. And now it's all about playing to this level of competition that you say that you should be a part of. And that's beating the good teams. The Chargers did a great job in 2024 of beating the teams that they should beat. They did that much, much better than in previous seasons. Now it's, okay, let me go get all of the pieces that I need to come back and go really compete and go beat the teams in the regular season that you're going to see in the playoffs, so that you have the confidence that you can go out there and do it again.
Yeah, and I think you just want to go into those games and not just feel like you're just outpowered or overpowered, right? And outmatched from a skill standpoint. You feel like you have a coach that's going to keep you in there with coaches, the good coaches in the league. And I mean, Jim Harbaugh was outcoached in some of the games this season. He's got to, be better too in 2025. But yeah, I mean, I do think that with what they have and what they were able to do this year, they should absolutely be a better team, because you get to look at the guys who played well and try to re-sign them. And then for the guys who didn't play well, you can try to improve on. But let's get to this next one from Jackson, who says, buy or sell, the Chargers will have a top 10 offense heading into next season. And I thought this paired well with the ones we're talking about, David, just because I think we assume they're going to be better. But I think the emphasis is on the offense for sure, because when you have the number one ranked defense in the league, it's hard to say that's where the focus should be. But then again, the Chargers weren't really as far away from being a top 10 offense in 2024 as we thought they were. And I think for me, if Justin Herbert carried that offensive group to the 11th best offense in points per game in 2024, absolutely, they should be a top 10 offense in 2025.
Yeah, I'm buying it 1,000%. The Chargers need to improve the offensive line. They got to get a better running game. They got to add more pass catching talent. We know that. And obviously, Jim Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz are much smarter football people than we are, so they obviously know that too. So I assure, and I am almost 100% positive, that they are going to go out there and address the needs that they obviously see that need to get fixed, continue to build up the offensive line, continue to pursue that running game that they wanted to give Justin Herbert. I think all of those things are in the pipeline, and they all have to manifest themselves this offseason in order to get to that top 10 billing.
Yeah, and I think the thing too, which is probably a little bit different in our conversation, is actually building a top 5 kind of offensive personnel group, right?
Yeah.
Because Justin Herbert elevates the group. Like, this wasn't a top 11 personnel grouping in the offense, on offense this year. It wasn't even close. And there's so many good offensive groups out there. I mean, you look like the Bengals, the Lions, the Packers, the Vikings, the Eagles, the Texans skill players, the Dolphins skill players, the Buccaneers. Like, the list goes on and on. They have to close a pretty significant gap over at least the amount of offenses that you see and proven players that you see. Because when you look at this offense right now, you have 4 proven players you feel really good about. and 7 big question marks going into 2025. So how much can you improve those positions? I mean, you feel like you can improve them a lot, enough to jump one spot, at least in points per game. And there's a lot of other metrics, right? That's just one, and a good defense is going to help your points per game offensively by putting you in good positions. But it does feel like if you just give Justin Herbert a couple more pieces, a couple of better offensive linemen, 1 or 2 legitimate pass catchers, they're not very far from being a top 10 offense, even with the handicap of Greg Roman. But we still have more great stuff to get into, including what the Chargers will do this offseason and why I believe that we will absolutely see Joe Hortiz make a trade in 2025. So we're getting into all that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. I need to tell you guys about Prize Picks, though, because it's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most out of these final weeks of football action, and that's where Prize Picks comes in, because if you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you, because it's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money, and you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and it's as easy as this. For championship weekend, Prize Picks is starting you off right the way you want to with basically a freebie. Jaden Daniels throwing for more than half a passing yards. That's one of the 2 projections that you need to make Prize Picks work. You compare that with Josh Allen rushing for more or less than 47.5 rushing yards, or Josh Allen throwing for more than or less than 229.5 passing yards, or both. That's the great thing about Prize Picks, and they have a special offer for our listeners. You can download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win. Prize Picks, run your game. David, let's continue getting into our buy or sells here, and thank the everydayers out there always for making us your first listen, but also for hitting us up at Locked On LAC. I mean, people are even hitting David up on his TikTok to get their buy or sells in for today's show, and we appreciate everyone who contributes to the show. It's one of the things that we love most about the show, getting you guys involved, especially in the offseason, especially in this offseason where the Chargers don't need to find a new head coach, right? A lot more things are already in place and stable than they were in years past. But if you guys need a second listen, you want to keep up with everything going on around the NFL, make sure to check out the new slate at Locked On NFL, where they have 2 shows a day with my guy Tyler, the Madman Roland, and also Tony Wiggins in the barbershop as they bring on the experts that cover their teams every day on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts from. David, let's continue this buy or sell show here, getting into this one from Shaggy619, who says, buy or sell, Joe Hortiz will make at least 1 trade this offseason. If so, who from the Bolts will go? So that's interesting, because that's basically saying trading a player away, which is a conversation too. Trading doesn't necessarily mean either or, right? Like, they could trade for someone, they could trade away someone. It's not as easy to think about who they trade away this year, though, because you don't have the albatross contracts that you have to move on from just for a chance to sniff under the salary cap. But David, are you buying or selling this?
Yeah, I think Joe Hortiz has already shown us in his first year as the Chargers general manager that if he sees a deal that he feels like can improve the Chargers team, then he's going to make it. He's already done that. Elijah Molden, Taylor Heineke. I mean, just a couple of examples, obviously trading up in the draft to get the superstar, Ladd McConkey. Yeah, I mean, he's already shown it. And so I think it's just really nice, honestly, just, even being able to entertain this question, having a GM that will actually literally leave no stone unturned. We've heard that saying a million times, but we haven't really seen it in practice and in principle. And Joe Hortiz has already shown that. So I'm going to buy it 100%. I believe that he will make a trade.
It's hard. Like, the Ravens, when he was there, didn't always make trades. It felt like they did, but they didn't always make trades. But I do think when you see what Joe Hortiz did this season, because the one that you didn't bring up was obviously him trading away Keenan Allen. And I think when a lot of fans think about the Chargers trading, they're not thinking about giving players away. They're thinking about gaining a player. So I think gaining a player at this point where they're at cap-wise and all of those things is more likely.
Yeah.
If they were sending someone, though, that becomes a little harder. I mean, who would it be? Who could they possibly trade? Quentin Johnston's name pops up into my head. I don't know what the value would be. The other one that might be obscure that people wouldn't necessarily think that could actually, it's probably Zion Johnson. I don't think that they will, but pre-draft priors are a crazy, crazy thing. And any team can always be like, yeah, but if he was here, we could get more out of him. Exactly. So There's not a lot of guys I could see that could get moved that make a ton of sense to move. So I think that you love what Joe Hortiz was able to do. I mean, look at what he was, that even the Keenan Allen trade was the only trade I disagreed with. In the moment, I hated it. Now looking back over the season, it looks like it was the right move, right? It gave them the ammunition to go up and get Ladd McConkey. It also, in that trade for Ladd McConkey, ends up landing them Tarheeb Still. So worked out as good as it possibly could. Let's get to this next one here, though, specifically about the draft, because GP says buy or sell. Joe Hortiz gets aggressive again in the draft and trades up. That's interesting. Oh, I mean, I'm going to buy it, but it's tough because I think they could also trade back too. I think we only saw one of them, so it feels like that's the most likely option. But the Ravens also in his time there traded back a lot too. So I think you like that if they're convicted on someone, they'll go get him, right? And I think you like that it actually worked this time because Tom Telesco was also convicted many times and it never worked out. Melvin Gordon, Jeremiah Taunchu, Kenneth Murray, Manti Te'o. Those are the guys that Tom Telesco traded up for. So trade-ups aren't always a good thing, but at least you're 1-for-1 with Joe Hortiz, and it wouldn't shock me at all if he traded up to go get somebody, especially with the compensatory picks they have coming in. They should have the ammo later in the draft to move around how they want to.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it right now, they're probably going to have around 9 or 10 draft picks, and they have a lot of contracts, these one-year deals that, with several players that could easily leave and sign bigger contracts to get you even more picks. I mean, that was one of the things Joe Hortiz talked about at length in his
2026 picks, you're right.
Was trying to get those comp picks flowing, trying to get those, that whole cycle just continuously getting more and more cracks at bat. And so I think just given that information, I think that there's a high likelihood that a trade will be made. I'm not right now convicted enough to whether I'm going to say it's going to go up or down.
Sure.
But I do feel like a trade will be made.
Yeah, like I said, if I had to pick one, I'd buy it because we just saw him do it. And they did it many times. But, I could see it honestly going either way. Yeah. Last year, people were fans of trading back. Once you're in the 20s, trading back, I think, is a less sexy option for the fans, especially if they see someone there that they really want.
Yeah.
But who should the Chargers draft? I think that's where this buy or sell comes from Bitcoin, not crypto, who says buy or sell. Should the Chargers draft the most talented guard in the second round to give Zion Johnson some competition? So I'm going to sell it. And I think it's mostly just because it's I want to come out of free agency feeling much better about the interior offensive line than I do right now. I think the other thing is just it depends how things play out, right? Because right now, the best ranked guard, according to ESPN, and things change, is the 23rd best prospect, and that is Tyler Booker from Alabama. So you would have to take him with your first round pick if you want the most talented guard. After the Zion Johnson kind of debacle, or what feels like a debacle, right now, it's hard to imagine picking a guard in the first round with the needs the Chargers have and could be available. But I thought the interesting thing was the second best guard is the 47th ranked prospect. So you wouldn't even be able to get the second most talented guard, at least according to ESPN right now, with your second pick. But I understand why first of all, Zion Johnson isn't the only guard spot you should be worried about. I mean, you shouldn't be worried about competition for Zion Johnson, even though you should be. You cannot go into 2025 without it. But you're probably going to have a very open right guard spot as well.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted immediately after the season started, I want the Chargers to go buy the best guards that money can buy in the offseason. I want guys that have proven that they've done it at the highest level in the NFL. I mean, I'm just honestly tired of trying to take cracks at the bat on the interior in the draft. Go get proven commodities. Go pay them whatever they want. You have the money to be able to do it. You have already seen in this offseason, in this playoffs, and in pretty much every other playoffs, how important it is to have a strong interior of your offensive line. Go get the proven commodity, the guys that have already done it, and let it play out from there.
Yeah, and I think it's trying to find the balance of getting guys right now in free agency feels like the easiest way to get known commodities that can impact, positively for you in 2025. But it is both, right? It's finding guards and interior guys that can help you next season, but also starting to build up these later round picks that could develop into starters for you for cheap later down the road. Because right now the problem is you don't have anyone obvious that you think could even make the leap or even, make the argument for making the leap in 2025 right now on that interior. So I think we said it before. I mean, Zion Johnson, he turned back into a pumpkin, right? We saw a lot of improvements from him, but at the end of the day, in the biggest game, he reverted back to kind of what we thought he was. And that's the unfortunate part. And now I 100% don't believe his fifth-year option is going to get picked up. Obviously that sucks for him, but like, I don't know how you possibly could at this point. And I just think that the most likely scenario, though, still is that Zion Johnson's probably back and you replace the other two guys, but I think you just can't go into 2025 without any competition. So let's get to one more fun one here, David, as we try to finish out these buy or sells with AJ, who says, buy or sell, you laughed for more than 5 minutes when the Raiders didn't get Ben Johnson. David?
Sorry, I just had to get an accumulation of the 5. Absolutely, I'm buying it. That was amazing. Also, I had absolutely no doubt that Ben Johnson was going to pick anybody but the Raiders. And why would it not make sense to go to the proven quarterback commodity that you feel like you're going to actually be able to do something with? And also that, those awesome weapons they have at their disposal. Come on. He was never going to the Raiders. And it's just funny that another good hot coach is going somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm very excited not to think about Ben Johnson and what he could do with a Brock Bowers, right? That's scary. And it's also just funny because like the Raiders didn't even try to pursue Harbaugh, gave up on their pursuit of Harbaugh to keep Antonio Pierce, who, flamed out in less than a season, right? When they decided they were going to get rid of him, basically. Tom Telesco also pour one out for the homie who got fired after 1 year as the Raiders GM. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, the thing is, even guys like Ben Johnson, like, you just never know how these guys are going to translate. I mean, we have seen that the Raiders make a dumb decision before by bringing in Josh McDaniels, and I laughed for more than 5 minutes when they did that because I thought it was so idiotic. But, yeah, I mean, if you can keep someone, an offensive mind like that, Ben Johnson, out of the division, I think you chalk that up for a win, just in case it does work out and he does become a great head coach in the next, McVay or Shanahan or Kevin O'Connell. He's not dealing with you, right? You have enough to deal with already. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow because we have our very first special guest of the offseason. We have the Athletics' Daniel Popper coming on the show. Can't wait to break things down with the guy who is there asking Jim Harbaugh the hard questions all season long. So to make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. And we'll be blasting it out to all of our social media at Locked On LAC on Twitter, Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can also find the show every day on my Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David at Dro Talk SD. Thank you to everyone who hit us up on today's show with their buy or sells, everyone who hit us up on social media or called into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. We have the best fans out there, and we appreciate the everydayers, especially in the offseason. But first big guest of the offseason comes tomorrow. Daniel Popper joins the show. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.